It's been more than a month of living in a stay-at-home advisory. Many parents of young children are now tasked with basically homeschooling, along with having to keep up with their own remote work. Those parents might not be getting sleep. Their children might be keeping them up at night. Parents of teenagers have to live with these beings who are in a developmental stage that says hating your parents is a milestone. And then parents have to coexist with each other. All that without parks and beaches, Mark. What are you seeing in your own practice as this human experiment goes on, and is it time to update our coping strategies?
Well, I was hoping for an easy question, but I guess I didn't luck out today.
Let's start
with a short question.
No, well, I think that any thoughts I have to be framed by I'm saying any of my suggestions with great humility, because I have good ideas, but they don't always work in the real world. So we all try, but it's not necessarily guaranteed to succeed what I'm suggesting, at least not every single time. But what I would say is what I'm seeing is, just to start with the last part of your question, is good things and bad things. So the good things are that families are telling me that across the board, age range of kids wise, that they are having more time to actually sit down with each other, play games, actual old-fashioned games like cards and board games, not electronics. They're watching shows together as a family. They're having meals together as a family. And people feel very grateful for that, because at least parents do, because as we all know, our lives have gotten so hectic with electronics and multiple kids with multiple activities. And so that wasn't happening before this crisis. So that's a good part of this. The tricky parts are exactly what you just said, is if you're a parent and you're trying to homeschool, first of all, that's an impossible task. But we're used to having our kids give us a break by being in school for 6 or 7 hours a day, and we get a chance to have get our own stuff done or work or have some downtime, and now it's on. So it's hard. The way to do it in terms of little kids is to make sure that you try to have as much structure in the day as possible. And I'm actually a big fan of alternating electronics and like good television, or even like sort of cartoony, junky television, with a little schoolwork, and a little outdoor activity, a little arts and crafts. If you're a parent and you worry about arts and crafts, it's really just, and I know this from my own practice with kids, like I'm not a great artist, but I have construction paper, I have crayons, I have some washable magic markers, and that's all kids really need. If you want to throw in a little clay or Play-Doh, it's really good to have art time as a structured activity. And you really actually do want to make the day into roughly, 45-minute to hour and a half long segments where the kids are doing one activity and then you help transition them to another. You can build in like, oh, I need to work or I have a meeting. Like some kids 4 or 5 and up can play in a close proximity to you, quietly with Legos or do coloring. I mean, some kids are able to do that, some kids not. But it's okay to like, okay, now you're going to play with your Legos or your cars for a half hour while mom or dad does this sewing or makes this meal. And you can sit in, I see you, but this is your activity. So really feel free to set as many limits as your kid will tolerate around structure and activities. I'm a huge fan. We don't have many geniuses in psychology. Mr. Rogers is one of them. I'm a huge fan of rewatching his episodes on Amazon Prime. he has amazing ideas that are applicable to this time in general, and we could do a whole episode on what I think that is. But he's got these amazing, simple ideas. Oh, pick up a leaf, bring it in the kitchen, trace it with a pencil, color it in, trace it again with the veins, color it in. Like, let's make a cake. What are all the ingredients? How do we, like, just simple stuff. Folding construction paper to make a hat. Like, he's got a million of those things, and if you sprinkle one into every day, and you can do repeats of it, your child will be like in heaven with that stuff. It really is. It really is how much time can you as a parent give one on one, and then give yourself the off time with the television or a video game or something like easy and fun where you don't have to supervise them, but intersperse that throughout the day so you stay sane. It's a little bit more tricky with when they get 7 to 12, because now they're more independent, and now they really ideally developmentally they should be 95% of their time, free time, should be with other kids. So it's a real problem, and we're going to have consequences from this deprivation down the road. But meanwhile, again, I think it's structure. It's making sure you compliment the child on what you like about what they're doing. If you see them, if they help you take out the garbage, recognize that. I really like the way you helped me take out the garbage. It sounds simple, but it is, but it's really hard to do, and make it a practice to like really recognize what positive things you're seeing from your kid to help them feel really like good about who they are and what they're doing. I think the more activity kind of things you can do with kids, the better. So like a treasure hunt in the yard, you know, it is hard to get to parks, but we still I see and I do walk on the street and stay away from other people. Like, you can take family walks, and um, you know anything to do with like using your eyes to find certain things. Like, I Spy is a great game to play with 7 to 12s. Then once you get into adolescence, this is the real hard time, because what I'm hearing is, the kids are staying going to bed at like 2 and 3 in the morning, and they're waking up at like noon, which, to tell you the truth, if it didn't make us crazy, it's really not a bad thing for them. Circadian rhythm wise, as long as they're getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep, that's fine. But it makes our lives a little difficult. But at the same time, when I see parents try to fight that, all the kids are like, well, all my friends are up at this hour. This is when we're playing video games. This is when we talk. I can understand why it's been okay with most parents to let their kids do that. So I think that's their social time. And girls are play video games with less frequency than boys, but um, they're actually struggling a little bit more, in my opinion, because they're used to much more face to face, and no offense to boys, but slightly higher level communications adolescent girls are used to doing and can do, and boys are fine. Which team slaughtered which team on my game. That's their, but that's okay too. That's where they're at. But so I think girls are having a little bit of a harder time. I've I've tried to help people find ways of social distancing, but still having face-to-face contact, like pulling up to a driveway in a car, going for a walk with masks on. Some of the girls that I work with have been doing that with their friends and staying 6 feet away and being outside with them. It seems like it would be safe according to everything that I'm reading. So that social thing, when kids are you know 12 to 18, 19, that's really key. The tragic thing that I haven't sort of gotten my mind around yet is, like, there's going to be, in all likelihood, very few summer jobs for kids. Between, usually kids 14 and 15 in my practice are working in the summer, or being camp counselors, or being counselors in training. And I think that's not going to probably be very easy to do. So I'm actually personally scared about what we're going to do, and haven't really figured out what ideas. I'm working on it, but what we can do for these kids as a community uh, during the summer and into the fall, because a lot of kids have part-time jobs during school. So I'm kind of stuck on the older teenagers for the summer thing, but I'm still thinking about it.
So just give us a hint of what you're thinking about there, Mark. What are you working on?
um, I think that the hint is first that I'm freaking out, and then sort of trying to like get a grip. But I think the thing that's going to be important is anything that one of the things I'm discussing with families that I work with is anything that your adolescent child can do around the house to help you chore wise is super, super important, ranging from helping with the groceries to dishes. If you don't have those things in your house already, implement them. Kids need to be busy and take responsibility. I think, yeah.
Should they be paid for those chores?
Well, everybody has a different view of that. I think my view is you pay kids if it's sort of out of the realm of ordinary. Like I had a dad who was asking his son to dig a drainage ditch, and it took 7 hours. So I thought he should be paid for that time. But when he does empties the dishwasher, takes out the garbage, helps with the groceries, that's just part of being in a family. That's that's my philosophy. Like some things you do because you're part of a family. Some things you do if it's extraordinary, yeah, we'll give you some money for it. I also have talked to kids about um, like uh, girls I've talked to about sort of like Zoom babysitting, where you Zoom with kids and do activities with little kids, either, 2 or 3 in a group. But like girls are great at like telling stories, at doing drawing together, at just talking. Like adolescent girls, for like 7, 8, 9-year-old girls or boys, that's really good. Hate to sound gender biased, but I'm just, the genders do have different strengths at different ages. And boys I've talked to about, finding any way to be entrepreneurial in your neighborhood. Can you knock and stand 6 feet away from your door of your neighbor that you know and ask if they need their lawn mowed or their lawns picked up? Can you start a business? Anything like that to keep you busy. I've also got kids like looking online for next year in case we're in a remote learning situation again for the fall. Like, is there anything online that you can do? I'm sure there's an age limit, but what about this contact tracing thing? Can you intern with anybody who's doing it? Can just to, and anything that's just to look online for anything that anybody, people have great imaginations, and there may be ways of helping people work remotely or with social distance that kids could do. But I have the kids try to like do some of that research now. Like just get online for 15 minutes a day. If you come up with nothing, fine. If you come up with, one thing, let's talk about it and think about it.
Mm-hmm. And what are you seeing as the consequences of kids not being successful at engaging with something? What, for a teenager, what does that mean if they're not going to be, if they can't find a job this summer? What are we worried about here?
Well, I mean, I think it's important to frame it like before COVID, if a kid didn't find a job, that would be like, and they wanted a job and it fit into their life, but they couldn't like sort of get it together. Then that would be like a mental health issue for me. Like, okay, so is there anxiety? Is there depression? Is there low self-esteem? but kids not finding work now is an external crisis as opposed to anything internal, at
Mm-hmm.
least at first glance. So then we have to sort of support them and empathize with them in terms of the difficulty of finding a job. But if you have too much kind of idleness, kids can get hyper self-reflective. Like, in other words, it's really good for people, all of us, but kids especially, to have a focus not only on yourself as how am I doing, who am I growing, but also on other people and other interests and passions. So if you block kids from that, then the tendency is for them to have their natural and in ordinary circumstances healthy narcissism like sort of magnify, and then they can get very self-conscious. So I have kids already who I'm seeing like don't want to do FaceTime with other kids. They have a breakout acne wise and they're freaking out. They think that everybody's looking at them on their Zoom calls, and so they get a little neurotic, and that's the worry. That's the worry, and also that it's very important for self-esteem to have a sense of industry, like and self-esteem from being able to do stuff. So like, oh yeah, I'm a lifeguard this summer, or I'm a counselor in training. Like that gives identity, self-esteem. So to not have that, we just don't. There's no like historical precedent for this. So like I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I think it puts kids more at risk for depression, anxiety, hyper self-consciousness, which can lead to like obsessive, obsessional behavior, obsessional thinking. Those are all the risks.
Corey, do you have any thoughts?
Not specifically for this subject, but because of what he was saying, I've jotted down notes for subsequent conversations, which I think would be pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I think we need to follow up with a lot here.
Yeah.
Oh, like what? Just out of curiosity.
Well, one thing I was wondering is how, I guess, these people of all ages, but I guess from school age, now that they know they're not going back to the buildings for the rest of this school year, they're also not going to be getting something like a report card, which is telling, which is sort of another adult gauging,
Right.
So I'm wondering how that could positively or negatively affect a school child.
Well, what I see already is just a lot of apathy and boredom because they're like, it's only pass fail anyway. No one's going to be staying back. So I can't even motivate to get my work done, not some of the older kids. The little kids are just sort of grinding it out if their parents make them. But they're, really miserable. And then you see, like, I've been seeing, like, kids that never had a behavior problem before, like a little boy who's like 8, never had a behavior problem, an angel. And with the homeschooling, and his mom has to like try to enforce some of the stuff, he's yelling, he's smacking furniture, he's throwing himself on the floor, he's saying swear words like never before. So that it's just this, and kids are so used to like their friends and their teachers. As much as they complain, man, we don't want to go to school, they actually do love it, and they need it. They need that contact. I have a little girl who's having trouble sleeping and thinks she's going to be kidnapped. And, she was like, had some anxiety problems before, but not like at that level. So, and her mom's really good with her. Mom's doing a great job doing the homeschooling thing, doing some lessons online, lots of stimulation, lots of walks, older sibs helping, but she's having a really hard time because she's used to seeing her friends every single day, and and they're talking about who dyed their hair purple and who has like the coolest crayon today, and oh, I have sparkles on my shoes, and like none of that stuff is getting mirrored back to them. That's a really important um, developmental provision kids need, is like the mirroring back of something that is about themselves that's interesting or exciting, like, oh, I have sparkly shoes, or my mom let me dye my hair purple, or I have new glasses, or look at my dress today, or I just did this drawing, or I won the ball game. Like, they're not getting that. So we have to try to, as adults, do our best to try to amplify what we're doing in terms of that kind of positive mirroring feedback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would just think there would be a lot of students who sort of rely on that sense of achievement.
Right. Right.
Right.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Well, I think we have a lot to talk about, including returning to how those parents deal with the temper tantrums. And I'm sure the temper tantrums probably go on all day long and are appearing, as you just proved, in new ways.
Yeah.
So should we continue that conversation another time?
Sure.
Because it would be a good one to have. Yeah.
Sure.
And I'd also like to talk about the college kids coming home. And, they will be 20 years old with no friends and no homework to do and no job. So let's follow up with those conversations. Okay.
Okay.
We should definitely do a Mr. Rogers episode too.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm into
that's
that.
great. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Right, thanks for your time again, Dr. Konecky. And we will do this all over again, maybe 1 week from today.
Okay, sure. Whenever you guys want. Thanks for having me on.
Take care.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.